as I wrote in the newsletter article, I was really surprised when I found out. I didn't think this would happen to Phil, of all people. I was really surprised it was him. What happened was that several years ago, when I was pastoring a church in Duluth, I put together a weekend retreat for young couples. We had several couples that have been married for less than 20 years, and some of them were having difficult time. And it was about the time for them to really revisit the really question of what marriage was, why they got married, and to listen to each other and to share with one another really where their hearts at. In other words, they just got a little too comfortable with their marriage, and they weren't spending the effort. So I invited this couple that I knew from my college days. He happened to be the former director of, then it was called Campus Crusade for Christ, or now it's called the Cru. And he was a campus director at University of Wisconsin at Madison. Him and his wife have a great story, or he tells a great story about what they went through in marriage with her illness. And their story was really instrumental in how I come to understand the marriage and what's potentially hard and difficult in marriage. And so I really felt it was important for this other couples to hear the story and what helped David and his wife Tammy to really their marriage to survive. So I invited them to come and be the speakers for the weekend. And so during one of the breaks that we had, David, my former director, and I had an opportunity to talk. So we started talking about various people we knew. And it was always interesting to find out who went on to join the staff. That's what we talked about, because that's what so much of the Campus Crusade now the Cru, their ministry was really designed to do, is trying to use a campus ministry as a recruitment for their new staff people. Because the Cru really took no responsibility for their staff, meaning they didn't have to pay them, because Cru raised their own support, so they were essentially missionaries. So they came with their own finances. So then they just recruited as many people as they can to join the staff. And so we were talking about several of our friends that went on to be staff. Some of them, after a year or two, they left, and some of them stayed on. And it was always surprising who stayed and who didn't, type of a thing. And then I asked about Phil. He was my Bible study leader when I was in college. Now, Phil was one of those people that you would think would make a great Christian. He had a great story, and he had all the right looks. I mean, he was tall. The women talk about tall, dark, and handsome, and he had that little bit of the Australian British accent that the girls swooned over in college. And he had a great, sense of humor, so he was quick to laugh, and you could tell a great joke, and the girls just all, hung around him on campus. But also Phil's story is that when he was a young man, he didn't make really good choices, and when he got out of high school, somehow he just started working in mines, and he worked his way into England, and he was just working in mines in England. And one of the other miners took him under his wing and basically said, look, young man, you need to make some different choices in life, because this is a dead-end job. And he said, you better, and you're smart, and so you should go to school and get yourself an education. So Phil, by the time he came to college, he had a great story of great conversion. And he told the story about how with a miner that he accepted Christ in the mine and, being in the middle of the work, and just how his life, changed quickly. and how he came to the United States. He went to college, but he also came with money. And so, of course, he became the most popular guy. He was a little older, a little more mature, didn't act like the rest of the 18-year-olds like me and others that were running around the campus like, some teenagers who didn't know his left from his right. But Phil was different. His faith was mature. He's been Christian for several years already. He knew the Bible well, and he was very articulate. And the way he talked and shared with the little bit of the British accent and with a little Australian accent, I tell you, it was mesmerizing to listen to him, and he always had an audience. And then, of course, he married the one girl that everybody in the crew wanted to get to know and go out on a date with, the one girl that, that all the guys thought were the most beautiful. Of course, he married her. So I asked David, my former director, what happened to Phil? Where is he now? Thinking that Phil had joined the staff, and then he would be some campus director or regional director and, someplace and very successful as in Christian ministry. And that's when his face really turned sad. And then he shared with me that Phil, once he graduated and got his undergraduate degree, stayed on a little longer on campus. He went and got his MBA. And then during the time as a student, he was so mature, and he was seen as such a leader that they considered him up as a volunteer staff. So they gave him a staff position, even though he was a student. And he was leading the Bible studies and leading the large group meetings, and he was going to the national meetings and all of these things. But then everything changed overnight when he graduated. The day after he graduated, he moved to outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where he had a job working in brokerage firms. And I was told that he never went to church again. He became very focused on his career, and that his involvement in the church he never went to church, and he just simply focused on the ministry. And their marriage lasted only 2-3 years after, because she wanted to continue to have that marriage based on what she always thought would be the Christian values, and someone who would be involved in the life of the church or Christian faith. And here, while in college, he fit all of the profile. But the day after he graduated, he just simply walked away from all of it. And last thing David knew was that he was very successful. Phil was very successful in his business. But he never darkened the doorway of church again. We all know stories about people like that, don't we? We all have stories about our friends who went on to summer camps and became very excited. Anybody at the summer camp high? Anybody else, right? You went to summer camp and you got really excited, when you were at the camp. And then you came back and saying, we're going to talk to all of our friends, and we're going to create a great youth group and get everybody to go to church together. Right? And then first time you come back and you try to talk to your friends, and they go, fine, that was your summer vacation. We are doing whatever we're doing here. And then after a couple, 3 weeks of trying to hang around with your friends and trying to tell them about what you went through the camp, and your friends saying, well, we're not interested in hearing it anymore because they heard it already. And you stop talking about, and by the time school started, all your emotional high of the summer camp disappeared. So that's why youth groups create, as a youth pastor, and I'm just as guilty as every other youth pastor that was there. After the summer camp, We do these events at church to keep the fire going. And then once the school starts, and by end of September, we have another retreat so that you guys don't completely lose everything, but the kids can keep going, and we can just refueling that along the way. So there's a strategy in trying to do this because we know what happens. And all the pastors know this. But yet we continue to schedule these things where kids have emotional high and they just simply fall off. So this roller coaster ride of Christian faith happens over and over again. We go through these events, whether they're retreats, they're camps, there could be conferences, or they could even be some Sunday morning worship service where you feel something unusual, something different. And yet the question becomes, how do we sustain that? How do we keep that going? The story that Jesus tells this morning is that as the sower throws the seeds, 3 out of 4 seeds that he talks about don't make it. They disappear in various stages for various reasons. Because for whatever reason it is, there are opposition or difficulties to Christian faith or sustaining the Christian faith. Actually, it is with all faiths. So there are certain things that we know of that often what we do and we think is what helps keep our Christian faith in place, but often don't work. And you have to decide for yourself what works for you. Some people rely on rituals. There are certain written prayers they repeat over and over again. And some religions have a lot of those in trying to keep people doing this repetition. But again, the question becomes, does it come from the heart or not? Or does the repetition become just simply something that we go through? Even when you do these repetitive rituals, you have those moments when they have greater meaning than other times. Sometimes they don't mean anything, but other times those rituals can be very meaningful. So I wouldn't say just simply write them off, but follow them through. For example, we have that, don't we? We have prayer Jesus taught us. Now, we have 2 different versions going on here, because one version is the one that church always sang and knew. We sing it now, trying to keep that going. But for some of us, we've said that same prayer so many times, we don't think about it anymore when we say it. So I rewrote it. And forcing you to read with unfamiliar words, hoping that you will read the words. And give yourself a moment to think about what you are reading. So every other week, we alternate between saying the prayer and singing the prayer. Trying to honor some of your practice, which works for you, which is rituals, and for some, something that is new. So there are rituals that we sometimes can use to help us keep ourselves going. There are also community that we build. Again, same thing, right? When we have a community, we always share food, and this morning, Shena, thank you so much for great food, and they brought the soup that I love. That he's connecting with the Korean grandmother, you said, right? Yeah, he's connecting it connected with my stomach, I can tell you that. But we create these kind of situations where it's not just to say, so we don't walk away hungry, but it is to connect with one another. Even with the simple thing as a soup or any other kind of a dish that's there. Connecting with a heritage, connecting with what is meaningful to them. So don't miss those opportunities. If you are part of the team that provides food on certain day, don't be afraid to bring something that is more meaningful to you, and don't be afraid to share that. And I know, John, you have done that in the past when you brought something in and you had a story with it. And those are the things that build community. You see, it's the same with Elena, brings something from the, her Spanish heritage. That is what makes the community and the fellowship time that meaningful. It is not only about eating, but it is about creating an environment where creating opportunities where we can see each other and hear each other, not just words, but the heart and the effort that they're making as they are revealing themselves to us. Because every food has a story. And that is really important for us to learn from each other. This is why, same way, we do our call to worship in all of our native languages. Except, of course, Michael no longer can really speak Taiwanese and read Taiwanese, so we let him off. And I'm picking on Michael here. But the fact that we can now, this morning, have call to worship in 8 different languages, or 7 because of Aria is she's in Fiji and went to Philippines, and Sam doesn't read Tagalog anymore. So, and this is a part of our community as we are, trying to recognize each other's background, each other's story, and all that we are talking about is creating a space for one another. And so once, again, we will make mistakes and we'll learn along the way. I know that Williams was from India and he's a graduate student. And so, of course, living in the United States, and I'm sure some of you made the same assumptions I did. And I made the same assumption with the scientist earlier. And thinking I know a thing or two, I said, oh, if you're from India, of course you speak Hindi. Because most other people that I knew from India, or those who even went to study in India, talked about Hindi and so on. So I met 1 or 2 people, so I assumed that's what it was. And so, of course, we put Hindi in, and one Sunday, scientist not here, so I asked William to come up and read the Hindi in the call to worship, and he looks at it and goes, that's a foreign language to me. Hindi was no closer to him than it was to anybody else. But I made that assumption simply because the country that he is from. And so then we have to put in Telugu, so that's much more graphically, if you notice, it's a nice, beautiful language that's there, and even the sounding, it's a beautiful language. And scientist, we have to apologize to you. What's your native language of the region that you grow up in?
It's actually Telugu where I grew up, but my parents are from West Bengal, so my native tongue, so to speak, is Bengali.
And so she actually speaks Bengali. And so, of course, and I had to go and ask whether what she would prefer. And she said, no, just put it in Hindi and that works just fine. And so, but it is about creating the space, and reason for creating the space for everyone is so that everyone can have an enduring faith. Because what we do not want to do is to say a faith looks certain way. That's a certain way of remembering the Bible verses, certain way of saying prayers, certain ways of greeting and looking. I mean, it was really funny when I was in college, because one of the things we used to do in crew was we would go do what they used to call cold turkey. I don't know if you knew that or not. We just, go and cold call, just go interrupt somebody and go, hey, can I talk to you about Jesus type of a thing. And I was very good at that. being an extrovert that I am, I didn't care how many people said no to me. I just kept going and I talked to everybody. And as I was approaching the guy, one of the guys said, "Oh, you're with the crew." I said, "Oh, how can you tell? How did you know?" And he goes, "You look the part." I said, "What do you mean?" Because, this was in Wisconsin in the middle of winter. So I had, of course, my button-down collar shirt and crew neck sweater. He goes, "Button-down collar, crew neck sweater. That's what all you guys wear." And I looked and he said, "And you see those guys over there?" And then he had the guys with the crumpled sweaters. And then there was a little, baggier. And he goes, "No, those guys are with the navigators because they all look the same way." And then they were much more frumpier looking. And they were the humbler look type of a thing. And he was saying, "Yeah, you crusade guys, you guys all try to look good." And, and the navigators guy try to look like over there. And you see those guys hanging in small groups, just, talking just among themselves. They're in a varsity because they only talk among themselves. They had all the stereotypes, but you know what? They had all of us figured out. Those stereotypes, whether we like it or not, that back when I was in college, they all fit. We have ways to help each other. And we can force, as a church, what we have to recognize is that we don't have the luxury of these student groups, because if somebody didn't fit into the group that I was with, they just went and joined another group. But often the danger is when somebody leaves a church, they don't go to another one. Often when a church does them wrong, or a church does not meet their need, they just simply disappear. The effort that people make to cross the threshold into a church, it just takes immense amount of energy and the mental energy and emotional strength. And we need to honor that. And we do that by creating the space. Because every spiritual effort someone makes is an effort to have an enduring faith. And what we need to do is honor that. And as a church, we do that. So this is why we recognize each person for who they are. We recognize the personhood of each person that's here. And we welcome everybody. Because what we do know is this. As the story says, God is like the sower who throws the seeds everywhere. We are used to farming methods where the farmer looks at the seed as a precious resource and wanting to make sure all those seeds produce, and the yield of the acreage becomes a key issue. So we even invented machinery that will plow the field and plant one corn every so often so that every corn will survive. But God's grace is not like that. God's grace is like a farmer who scatters seeds. Now, when I heard about farming and scattering seeds, my mind went to the side of saying, that's not a good way of doing farming. God's not a very good farmer. Because that's wasting seeds. That's wasting resources. Until I went to Palestine. And I went to a nature reserve. We were given a tour of a nature reserve. And the Dosan who was there was teaching us of the original of the historical agricultural system. And what was very interesting is reason that they scattered the seed is two things. Number one, if you plow the field, you create the dust and you expose the dirt to the wind, and especially in the dry areas. You actually kill the dirt and take the moisture out, and you create more of a desert. So it is an ecological thing to save the topsoil. And the other part is to maximize all of the land and giving every land to have an opportunity to grow something rather than only certain places. And that's why the farming method in that part of the world is not plowing and putting in seeds every 9 inches, but it is simply scattering seeds wherever they may go. God's grace is scattered everywhere. Everyone is a recipient of God's grace. Question for you and me is, can we build enduring faith in ourselves and one another? So can we be the people that can create a space, and when we share with one another our stories of faith and our lives, it is about how we are building enduring faith among ourselves. So may we build enduring faith. May we indeed be the good soil that Jesus talks about. And may our conversations and may our effort as a community of faith be about how to produce the mercy and grace of God in ourselves and in each other. Amen.